The steam rose thick in the shower room at Dannemora Correctional. 5 lifers had waited 3 weeks for this moment. They called themselves the Iron Brotherhood. 25 years each, minimum. Nothing left to lose. Mike Tyson stood under the last shower head, water running down his back. He knew they were there. The silence told him everything. No guards, no witnesses, just concrete walls and the sound of dripping water. The biggest one, Martinez, stepped forward first. 6'4", arms like tree trunks. The others spread out behind him. Tyson didn't turn around. He reached for the soap. "Turn around, champ." Tyson's hand stopped. He'd been waiting for this too. What Tyson did next changed everything about how power really works in prison. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The alarm screamed through the corridors like a dying animal. Cell doors clanked open with mechanical precision. Another day in America's most secure fortress. Mike Tyson sat on the edge of his narrow bunk, holding a letter from his daughter. The paper was soft from being read too many times. The letter was 3 pages long, written in careful handwriting. She told him about school, about her friends, about the books she was reading. She never mentioned the trial, never mentioned the headlines, never mentioned the shame of having a father behind bars. "Dad, I made the dean's list again. Professor Martinez says my paper on constitutional law was the best in the class. I think about you every day. I know you're working hard to be better. I love you." Tyson folded the letter and placed it in the small box under his bunk, next to 17 other letters, the only things in his cell that mattered. He'd been here 14 months, long enough to understand the invisible rules, long enough to know who ran what, long enough to earn the quiet respect that comes from controlled violence. The first week, 3 inmates had tried to make names for themselves. Tyson put the first one in the infirmary with a broken jaw. The second one learned to walk again after 6 weeks. The third one just transferred to another block. Word spread quickly in a place where information was currency. But that was then. Now Tyson followed a different pattern. Up at 6, exercise until 7:30, breakfast, library duty until noon, lunch, more reading, dinner, sleep. He'd learned that routine was armor in a place where chaos meant death. He pulled on his orange uniform and stepped into the corridor. Guards nodded. Other inmates moved aside. Not from fear anymore, but from something deeper. Recognition. The Iron Brotherhood had been watching him for weeks. 5 men who controlled the heroin trade on C Block. Men who'd killed before and would kill again. Martinez was their leader, a former Marine who'd strangled his commanding officer over a poker game. Martinez had a theory about famous people in prison. They were symbols. Break the symbol and you owned everyone who believed in it. Tyson represented something that couldn't be allowed to exist. Hope. Warden Thompson knew about the Brotherhood. Hell, he'd known about them for 3 years. But they kept order on their block. They settled disputes. They prevented riots. Sometimes the devil you know is better than the chaos you don't. But Thompson also knew that Tyson was different. The man drew attention. Reporters, activists, people who asked uncomfortable questions. If something happened to Tyson, questions would be asked, investigations would be opened, careers would be destroyed. Tyson walked toward the dining hall, his footsteps echoing off concrete walls. He could feel eyes watching him, always watching. In prison, reputation was everything. Lose it once and you never got it back. He'd built his reputation carefully here, not through wild violence, but through controlled precision. One warning, one chance, one consequence. The old Tyson would have destroyed everything in sight. This Tyson chose his moments. At breakfast, he sat alone, always alone. Not because no one wanted to sit with him, but because sitting with Mike Tyson meant choosing sides. And in prison, choosing sides could get you killed. He ate his eggs and toast in silence, reading a book about ancient philosophy. Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who understood power and responsibility. Tyson had read it 4 times. Each time he found something new. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy. The words hit different when you were wearing orange and eating off metal trays. Across the dining hall, Martinez watched him read. The Brotherhood leader hated everything about what he saw. The calm, the control, the quiet dignity. It was everything Martinez had lost years ago. Everything he'd convinced himself didn't matter. Martinez had grown up in East LA. Foster homes. Juvenile detention. The Marine Corps was supposed to save him. Instead, it taught him how to kill efficiently. When he came back from Iraq, the killing didn't stop. It just moved to different places. Prison was supposed to be his punishment. Instead, it became his kingdom. He ruled through fear and practical violence. Men respected him because they had to. But Tyson was different. Tyson had earned something that couldn't be taken by force. After breakfast, Tyson walked to the library. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly librarian, smiled when she saw him. She was the only person in the prison who treated him like a human being instead of a legend. "Morning, Mike. New philosophy book came in yesterday. Thank you, Mrs. Patterson." She handed him a worn copy of Epictetus. Tyson ran his thumb over the cover. Another man who understood the difference between what you can control and what you can't. He spent the morning reshelving books and helping inmates find what they needed. Most were looking for legal texts, appeals, loopholes, ways out. Tyson had stopped looking for ways out. He'd started looking for ways through. At lunch, the tension was different. Conversation stopped when he entered. Eyes followed him to his table. Something was building. He could feel it in the air like electricity before a storm. Martinez sat with his brotherhood at their usual table, 5 men who'd carved their names into the prison hierarchy with blood and fear. They weren't looking at their food, they were looking at him. Tommy the Snake Morales, armed robbery and murder, 25 to life. Big Jim Santos, killed 3 people in a bar fight, life without parole. Carlos Loco Rodriguez, drug kingpin who eliminated witnesses, death row commuted to life. Danny Ice Williams, contract killer, multiple life sentences. Each one was a weapon wrapped in human skin. Each one had nothing left to lose. Tyson finished his sandwich and returned to his cell. He pulled out his daughter's latest letter and read it again. She was graduating high school next month. Valedictorian, full scholarship to Columbia. She'd done everything right, despite having a father who'd done everything wrong. He wrote her a letter back. Careful words about responsibility and choices, about learning from mistakes, about the difference between being strong and being violent. That evening, during recreation time, Tyson exercised alone in the yard. Push-ups, sit-ups, shadow boxing with perfect form. His body was still a machine even at 50, but the machine served a different purpose now. An older inmate named Winston approached him. Winston had been in Dannemora for 37 years. He'd seen everything twice. "Storm's coming, Mike." "I know. You ready for it?" Tyson stopped shadowboxing and looked at the old man. "Been ready my whole life, Winston. Question is whether I'm smart enough to handle it different this time." Winston nodded and walked away. In prison, advice came in small doses. Too much talking got you labeled a snitch. That night, lying on his narrow bunk, Tyson stared at the ceiling and thought about legacy. About the man he'd been and the man he was becoming. About the difference between reputation and respect. His daughter's letter lay on his chest, rising and falling with his breathing. She believed in him, believed he could change, believed that mistakes didn't define a man forever. Tomorrow would bring another test. He could feel it coming like a freight train in the distance. The question wasn't whether it would arrive. The question was what he would do when it did. Outside his window, Dannemora slept. But predators never sleep. They just wait for the right moment to strike. The new inmate arrived on a Tuesday, fresh from county jail, scared, trying not to show it. His name was Rodriguez, and he carried a newspaper clipping in his back pocket like a talisman. The clipping was from Sports Illustrated, 1988. Mike Tyson knocking out Michael Spinks in 91 seconds. The crown jewel moment. When Tyson was the most feared man on earth. Rodriguez had been a boxer too, Golden Gloves champion in his weight class. He'd studied every Tyson fight, memorized every combination. In county jail, guys said Tyson was just another convict now. Rodriguez didn't believe it during lunch. Rodriguez approached Tyson's table. The dining hall went quiet. Everyone knew the rules. You don't walk up to Mike Tyson's table uninvited. "Excuse me, Mr. Tyson. I just wanted to say..." Rodriguez pulled out the newspaper clipping, yellow with age, creased from being folded and unfolded 1,000 times. "You were my hero, man. This fight changed my life." Tyson looked at the clipping, saw himself 20 years younger, muscle and fury and absolute confidence. A different man in a different world. "That was a long time ago, son. But it still matters. What you did, who you were, it still matters. Tyson studied the young man's face. Rodriguez couldn't have been more than 25. Same age Tyson was when that photo was taken. Same hunger in his eyes. Same belief that violence could solve everything. What's your name? Rodriguez, sir. Miguel Rodriguez. You fight? Golden Gloves. Won my division 3 years straight. Tyson nodded and handed the clipping back. Keep that. But remember something, Miguel. That man in the picture, he made a lot of mistakes. Don't make the same ones. Rodriguez walked away, but the damage was done. The newspaper clipping passed from hand to hand. Inmates whispered about the good old days, about when Tyson was a killer instead of a librarian. Martinez watched the exchange from across the room. The newspaper clipping bothered him more than he wanted to admit. It represented something he couldn't control. Memory, legend, the power of what used to be. That evening, Martinez called his brotherhood together. They met in the laundry room after lights out. 5 men who'd turned violence into a business model. Time to settle this Tyson situation. Tommy the Snake Morales cracked his knuckles. He'd been waiting for this conversation for weeks. What you got in mind, Martinez? Martinez pulled out a copy of the shower schedule. Guard rotations. Times when security cameras had blind spots. He'd been planning this for 3 weeks. Tomorrow, shower room. No guards between 2:10 and 2:20. 10 minutes to make our point. Big Jim Santos, 6'6" of muscle and scar tissue, leaned forward. We gonna kill him? No, too much heat. We're gonna break him, make him beg. Show everyone that legends die when they hit concrete walls. Martinez had done his research. He knew about Tyson's daughter, knew about the letters, knew about the books, knew that this version of Tyson was trying to be something different. That made him more dangerous, not less. Men who had nothing to lose were predictable. Men who had everything to lose made desperate choices, and desperate men were the most dangerous of all. What about the guards? Thompson's got 3 men on duty. Patterson takes smoke breaks at 2:15. Williams is in our pocket. Jackson's new and scared. They won't see nothing. Carlos Loco Rodriguez nodded slowly. And after? What happens when questions get asked? Tyson slipped, hit his head. Accidents happen in the shower room. The Brotherhood smiled. They'd used the same story before, 3 times. It always worked. The next morning, word spread through the prison like wildfire. Not through words, but through glances, through tension, through the electricity that fills the air before violence erupts. Inmates started placing bets, not on who would win, on how long Tyson would last, on whether he'd fight or submit, on whether the legend would die with dignity or beg for mercy. The newspaper clipping appeared on Tyson's bunk during lunch. Someone had written across it in red ink, "Where's your power now?" Tyson stared at the message for a long time. Then he folded the clipping and put it in his pocket. At 2:05 p.m., Tyson walked toward the shower room. He moved slowly, deliberately, like a man walking to his own execution. He'd known this day would come. Prison always demanded payment. The only question was what currency you used to pay. Behind him, Martinez and his brotherhood followed at a distance, like wolves stalking wounded prey. The shower room door swung open. Steam rose from the drains. 5 against 1. No witnesses, no mercy. But legends aren't made by running from fights. They're made by choosing which fights matter. Martinez sat on his bunk, carving a chess piece from a bar of soap. The king. He'd been working on it for 3 weeks, ever since he decided Tyson had to fall. The soap was soft under his hands, easy to shape, easy to destroy, just like men. He'd learned to carve in juvenile detention, 13 years old, facing his first real time. An older kid taught him the trade, said it kept your hands busy when your mind wanted to do violent things. Now Martinez carved for different reasons. Each cut was deliberate. Each line served a purpose. The king piece was almost finished, crown and all. Tomorrow he would break it in front of Tyson, show him what happened to royalty in the real world. Martinez had grown up understanding power. His father ruled their house with fists and fear. His mother never left because she believed she deserved the beatings. His little sister learned to hide in closets when Daddy came home drunk. When Martinez was 16, he'd had enough. He waited for his father to pass out, then held a pillow over his face until the struggling stopped. The police called it a heart attack. Martinez called it justice. The Marines taught him to kill professionally. Iraq taught him to enjoy it. Prison taught him to profit from it. The Iron Brotherhood wasn't just a gang, it was a business. They controlled the drug trade on C-Block, the gambling, the protection rackets. Guards looked the other way because order was profitable for everyone. But Tyson represented chaos, not through violence, but through something worse, influence. Martinez had watched inmates gravitate toward Tyson's quiet strength, the way he helped younger prisoners, the way he settled disputes with words instead of fists, the way he made men believe they could be better than their worst moments. That kind of hope was dangerous in a place built on despair. Tommy the Snake Morales entered the cell without knocking. That was the Brotherhood way. No privacy between brothers. Everything set for tomorrow? Martinez held up the Soap King piece, perfect in every detail except for a crack running down the middle. See this crack, Snake? That's what hope looks like when it hits reality. Snake examined the carving. Martinez's hands were steadier than a surgeon's. The king's face was almost lifelike. You ever think maybe we should just leave Tyson alone? Man's not causing trouble. Martinez's hand stopped carving. The question hung in the air like smoke. That's exactly why he's dangerous. Men who cause trouble are predictable. Men who inspire others, they change things. And change is bad for business. Martinez had built his empire on consistency. Fear was reliable. Violence was understandable. But hope? Hope made people take risks, made them believe things could be different. He'd seen it before. A charismatic inmate would arrive, start talking about redemption and second chances. Next thing you know, the drug trade slowed down. Guards got nervous. Administration started asking questions. Better to cut off the head before the snake grew too long. Big Jim's got concerns too. What kind of concerns? Says Tyson's got friends on the outside. Lawyers, media connections. If something happens... Martinez set down the Soap King and looked at Snake with dead eyes. Since when do we care about lawyers? We're lifers, Snake. What are they going to do? Give us extra life? That was the Brotherhood's greatest strength and weakness. They had nothing left to lose. No parole dates, no possibility of release. Death or old age in a cell. That freedom from consequences made them fearless. But it also made them reckless. Tomorrow changes everything. After we break Tyson, every inmate in this place will know who really runs things. The guards will remember why they need us. And the warden will understand the cost of letting celebrities think they're special. Snake nodded and left the cell. Martinez returned to his carving. 3 more careful cuts, and the king piece was perfect. Perfect and doomed. Across the cell block, Tyson lay awake, staring at the newspaper clipping. The red ink had faded, but the message remained clear. Someone wanted him to remember what he used to be. The old Tyson would have torn the place apart by now. Sent a message that disrespect had consequences, but that Tyson had destroyed everything he touched, including himself. This Tyson had learned patience, had learned that true strength meant choosing when to fight and when to walk away. But some fights choose you. He thought about his daughter's letter, about her belief that he could be better, about the promise he'd made to himself and to her that violence would no longer define him. But what happened when nonviolence meant letting evil win? At 6 a.m. the alarm sounded. Another day in paradise. Tyson folded the newspaper clipping and placed it next to his daughter's letters. Past and future. Destruction and hope. During breakfast, the tension was thick enough to cut. Martinez and his Brotherhood sat at their usual table, eating slowly, methodically, like men preparing for war. Other inmates whispered and glanced. Everyone knew something was coming. The question was when and how bad it would be. Tyson ate his oatmeal in silence. He'd stopped reading during meals, needed to stay aware. In prison, distraction was often the difference between life and death. You okay, Mike? Mrs. Patterson had approached his table. The elderly librarian looked concerned. She'd worked in prisons for 30 years. She could smell violence coming like a storm. I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Thank you for asking. If you need to talk... I know. Thank you. She squeezed his shoulder gently and walked away. The simple human contact meant more than she could know. In a place where touch usually meant violence, her grandmother's hand was a reminder that gentleness still existed. At library duty, Tyson reshelved books with mechanical precision. His movements were calm, controlled, but his mind was racing through possibilities. 5 men, trained killers, no weapons allowed, but men like that didn't need weapons. Their hands were weapons. The old Tyson would have struck first, found each man alone and eliminated them one by one. But that would make him the aggressor, would prove Martinez's point about violence. A young inmate named David approached the desk. 19 years old, in for armed robbery. First offense. "Mr. Tyson, can you help me find something? What do you need, son?" "Book about how to change, how to be different than you were." Tyson looked at the kid's face, saw his own desperate hunger for redemption reflected there. "Follow me." He led David to the philosophy section, pulled out 3 books: Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, a collection of Buddhist teachings. These men understood that we become what we repeatedly do. Change your actions, change your life. Did they work for you? Tyson looked toward the window. Outside, razor wire caught the morning sunlight like a broken crown. "Still working on it, David, every day." That afternoon, Tyson sat in his cell, writing a letter to his daughter. His hands were steady, but his mind was elsewhere, in the shower room, in the steam, in the moment when choice would become action. He wrote about responsibility, about the difference between courage and foolishness, about how sometimes the bravest thing a man can do is refuse to fight. But even as he wrote the words, he wondered if he believed them. At 2 p.m., Tyson folded the letter and placed it with the others. Then he walked toward the shower room, carrying nothing but the weight of his choices. Martinez was already there, holding the carved soap king. The piece was beautiful and fragile, art created for the sole purpose of destruction. Time to crown a new king, Tyson. Steam rose from the drains like ghosts escaping hell. Martinez stood near the entrance, the carved soap king balanced on his palm. Behind him, his brotherhood spread out in a practiced formation. Tommy the Snake Morales by the door. Big Jim Santos near the emergency alarm. Carlos Loco Rodriguez and Danny Ice Williams flanking the showerheads. Professional killers in their element. Tyson stood under the last showerhead, water cascading down his shoulders. He hadn't looked at them yet, hadn't acknowledged their presence, but his muscles were coiled like springs. Martinez reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a torn photograph, half of a family portrait. A woman and 2 children, their faces worn smooth by years of handling. The other half had been destroyed long ago, along with everything it represented. "You know what this is, Tyson?" Tyson turned slowly. Water dripped from his face like tears. "Family. Wrong. It's weakness." Martinez held the photograph higher, letting the steam blur the faces. "This was my wife, Maria, my kids, Sophia and little Miguel. Beautiful, right?" Martinez's voice carried a weight that hadn't been there before. Something raw, something broken. "They left me while I was in Iraq. Said they couldn't live with the man I'd become. Said I brought death home with me." He tore the photograph again, smaller pieces falling to the wet floor. "Know what I learned? Love is just fear with a pretty name. Fear of being alone. Fear of facing who you really are. Fear of admitting that monsters don't get happy endings." Tyson watched the pieces of photograph dissolve in the water. A family erased by steam and regret. "Your daughter still writes you, doesn't she? Still believes in Daddy's redemption story?" The question hit Tyson like a physical blow. How did Martinez know about the letters? What happens when she realizes the truth? That underneath all your philosophy and quiet dignity, you're still the same animal who destroyed everything he touched? Big Jim Santos cracked his knuckles. The sound echoed off the concrete walls like breaking bones. "That's what we're here to prove, Tyson. That change is just another lie men tell themselves to sleep at night." Tyson stepped forward, not toward Martinez, but toward the center of the room. The water from his shower head continued running, creating a steady rhythm against the concrete. "You're wrong about love, Martinez." His voice was quiet, but it carried through the steam like a blade. "Love isn't fear. Fear is what happens when love dies." Martinez laughed, but there was no humor in it. Pretty words from a man about to get his teeth kicked in. "Your family didn't leave because you were a monster. They left because you chose to be one." The words hung in the air like a challenge. Martinez's face went dead calm, the most dangerous expression a killer could wear. Enough talking. He nodded to his brotherhood. They began closing in, but Tyson held up one hand. The gesture was simple but commanding. Even hardened killers hesitated. "Before we do this, let me ask you something, Martinez. What does winning look like?" "What? You beat me down, break some bones, maybe put me in a coma. Then what?" Martinez stepped closer. Close enough that Tyson could see the scars on his knuckles. Close enough to smell the violence radiating from his pores. Then, everyone knows who runs this place. Do they? Or do they just know you're afraid of an old man who reads books? The Brotherhood stopped moving. The question cut deeper than they'd expected. Think about it. 5 men to take down one. Armed killers against a guy who hasn't thrown a punch in 14 months. What does that say about your strength? Snake shifted nervously. He hadn't thought about it that way. Shut up, Tyson. You want to be king? Real kings don't need to prove themselves to librarians. Martinez grabbed Tyson by the throat and slammed him against the wall. The Soap King fell from his other hand and shattered on the concrete. I said, shut up! Tyson didn't struggle, didn't fight back, just looked into Martinez's eyes with something that might have been pity. You keep that torn photograph because it's the only proof you were ever human. But you can't destroy love by destroying the people who loved you. Martinez's grip tightened. Tyson's feet barely touched the ground. You want to know why your family really left? Because love requires hope, and you gave up hope a long time ago. You don't know anything about my family. I know you're still carrying their picture. I know you tear it up and tape it back together. I know you wake up every night wondering if they think about you. Martinez's hand began to shake. The other Brotherhood members watched in confusion. This wasn't going according to plan. But here's what you don't understand. Hope isn't weakness. It's the only thing stronger than fear. Hope doesn't stop bullets, no, but it stops the men who fire them. Martinez released his grip. Tyson dropped to his feet but remained against the wall. The shower continued running, steam filling the air like fog. My daughter writes me because she believes people can change. Your family left because they believed you couldn't. They were right, were they? Or did you just prove them right because it was easier than proving them wrong? The question hit Martinez like a sledgehammer. His carefully constructed worldview began to crack. Change is hard, Martinez. Violence is easy. That's why men like us always choose violence first. Big Jim Santos stepped forward. He'd heard enough philosophy. Martinez, let's just finish this. But Martinez wasn't listening. He was staring at the pieces of his Soap King scattered on the wet floor. 3 weeks of careful carving destroyed in one moment, just like everything else he'd ever built. You think you're better than us? No, I think I'm tired of being like you. Tyson picked up one of the larger soap pieces, the king's crown still intact despite the fall. This is beautiful work, you've got talent. He held out the fragment to Martinez. But you used it to make something you planned to destroy. Just like you did with your family, just like you did with your life. Martinez stared at the soap crown. In the steam and shadow, it almost looked real. What if I told you there was another way? What way? Build something instead of breaking it. The Brotherhood watched in stunned silence. This wasn't a fight. It was something else entirely. Something they didn't understand. Carlos Loco Rodriguez broke the spell. Martinez, we came here to send a message. Yeah, Snake added. Can't back down now. But Martinez wasn't listening to them anymore. He was looking at the soap crown in Tyson's hand, seeing possibility where he'd only seen destruction. Your family might be gone, but their love isn't. Love doesn't die because people leave. It dies because we choose to kill it. You don't understand. I understand more than you think. I destroyed my family too, but I learned something you haven't. What's that? Redemption isn't about forgetting who you were. It's about choosing who you become. The shower room went quiet except for the sound of running water. 5 killers stood frozen in a moment of unexpected truth. Outside, guards were changing shifts. Inside, something more dangerous than violence was happening. Change. The small recording device was hidden behind a loose tile near the drain. No bigger than a matchbox, it had been there for 6 months, planted by Sergeant Williams during a routine maintenance check. Williams worked for the Torino crime family. His job was simple: record anything useful. Prison confessions, guard corruption, inmate deals. Information was valuable in the right hands. But today's recording would be worth more than information. It would be worth millions. The Las Vegas sportsbooks had taken over $3 million in bets on what would happen in the shower room. The odds were heavily in favor of violence. Martinez beating Tyson, Tyson fighting back, blood on the concrete. Nobody had bet on conversation. Williams sat in the security office, listening through wireless headphones. What he was hearing made no sense. Where was the violence? Where was the beatdown that would make him rich? He'd already taken money from 5 different sources. The crime family wanted dirt on Tyson for future leverage. A cable news producer wanted footage of the fallen champion getting destroyed. A betting syndicate wanted confirmation of the outcome. But this wasn't playing out according to script. Sergeant Williams? Guard Patterson stuck his head into the office. Williams quickly removed his headphones. Yeah? Warden wants to see you. Something about the shower room schedules. Williams felt ice water run through his veins. Did Thompson know about the device? About the bets? About the money changing hands? Tell him I'll be right there. Patterson left. Williams grabbed the headphones and listened again. Tyson was still talking. Martinez was still listening. The Brotherhood was still standing around like confused children. This was a disaster. Williams made a decision that would change everything. He opened his security panel and triggered the alarm system. Not the emergency alarm. The routine check alarm that would bring guards to the shower room. If he couldn't get the violence he'd been paid for, he'd have to create it himself. In the shower room, the alarm started buzzing, a low electronic pulse that meant guards were coming. Snake looked toward the door. We gotta go, Martinez. But Martinez was still holding the soap crown, still staring at Tyson like a man seeing himself for the first time. Time's up, Big Jim said. Guards will be here in 30 seconds. Martinez made his choice, but not the one anyone expected. Instead of attacking Tyson, he turned to his Brotherhood. Get out. What? All of you, get out, now. Martinez, you crazy? I said get out. His voice carried the authority of years of absolute command. The Brotherhood looked confused, but they obeyed. Snake, Big Jim, Carlos, and Danny filed out through the emergency exit, just as footsteps echoed in the corridor. Martinez and Tyson were alone. Why? Tyson asked. Because you're right, about the family, about the fear, about all of it. Martinez looked at the soap crown again. 3 weeks of careful work, the most beautiful thing he'd made since he was a child. I don't know how to be different. Nobody does. That's why it's called faith. Faith in what? In the possibility that tomorrow can be better than yesterday. The footsteps got closer. Martinez had seconds to decide what story he would tell. If the guards ask, you slipped, hit your head. I helped you up. Martinez, don't make me regret this, Tyson. Guard Patterson burst through the door, followed by 2 others. They found Martinez helping Tyson to his feet near the shower wall. Everything all right here? Tyson slipped, Martinez said. Wet floors. I made sure he didn't crack his skull. The guards looked suspicious, but there was no evidence of violence. No blood, no torn clothing. Just 2 inmates in a steamy room. You okay, Tyson? Fine, officer. Martinez helped me up. The guards exchanged glances. This wasn't what they'd expected to find. Williams had radioed something about an incident in the shower room. In the security office, Williams stared at his monitor in disbelief. The recording device had captured everything. The conversation. The choice not to fight. The moment when a killer decided to show mercy instead of strength. This was worse than no violence. This was evidence of character change. Evidence that the system could work. Evidence that even monsters could choose differently. Williams made another decision. He deleted the recording. The $1 million in betting money would be lost. The crime family would be angry. The news producer would look elsewhere for scandal. But sometimes covering up the truth was more valuable than revealing it. Because if word got out that Mike Tyson had talked a killer into walking away from violence, it would change everything about how people viewed prison, about redemption, about the possibility of real change. And some people made a lot of money from the hopelessness of the current system. Williams destroyed the hard drive and filed a report about equipment malfunction. The recording device behind the loose tile went silent forever, but the conversation it captured lived on in 2 minds. Martinez returned to his cell and threw away the rest of his soap carvings, all except the broken crown that he kept on his windowsill as a reminder that beautiful things could survive destruction. Tyson returned to his cell and wrote a letter to his daughter. For the first time in months, he had something hopeful to say. Outside both their windows, Dannemora stood unchanged. The same walls, the same bars, the same concrete and steel. But inside those walls, something had shifted. Something small but significant. One man had chosen differently, and choice, it turned out, was contagious. The question now was whether it would spread before the system found a way to stop it. Martinez couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the soap crown sitting on his windowsill, a reminder of the choice he'd made, the choice that might have changed everything or destroyed everything. His cellmate, a lifer named Rodriguez, watched him from the bottom bunk. "You okay, man? You've been staring at that thing for 3 hours." Martinez didn't answer. He was thinking about the recording device, about how Williams had looked nervous when the guards came back from the shower room, about how some conversations are too dangerous to let survive. In the morning, word would spread. The Brotherhood would demand explanations. Other inmates would ask questions. The delicate balance of prison politics would shift. Martinez reached under his mattress and pulled out a piece of broken mirror, sharp enough to cut, reflective enough to see truth. He'd carried the shard for 7 years, cut it from a mirror during his first prison fight, kept it as a weapon, used it to send messages carved into flesh and walls. Tonight, he held it differently, like a question instead of an answer. The reflection showed him a face he barely recognized. Scars and years and the slow erosion of hope. But underneath all that damage, something else. Something that might have been possibility. Across the cell block, Tyson sat at his small desk writing. The letter to his daughter was 8 pages long, the longest he'd ever written, full of stories he'd never told her, about choices and consequences, about the difference between strength and violence, about meeting a man in a shower room who chose mercy over murder. "Dad," he wrote, "I think I finally understand something. Change isn't something that happens to you. It's something you choose to do every day, every moment, even when nobody's watching, especially then." He sealed the letter and placed it with the others. 17 letters from her, 18 letters to her, a conversation across time and space and the walls that separated them. 2 cells away, Big Jim Santos was having a different kind of conversation. Martinez lost his mind, he told Snake through the bars. Let Tyson punk him out in front of everybody. Maybe there's more to it. Like what? Snake had been thinking about Tyson's words, about building instead of breaking, about hope being stronger than fear. Maybe Martinez saw something we didn't. Like what? A miracle? Like a way out? Out of what? Out of being what we are. Big Jim laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Snake, we're lifers. Ain't no way out of that. Ain't no redemption for men like us." "How do you know?" "Because if there was, somebody would have found it by now." But Snake wasn't convinced. He'd been watching Tyson for months, seen how other inmates responded to him, how guards treated him different, how even the warden showed a kind of respect. That didn't happen by accident. In the security office, Williams worked the night shift alone. He'd destroyed the recording, but he couldn't destroy the memory of what he'd heard. The conversation between 2 killers who chose words over weapons. His phone buzzed. Text message from his contact with the Torino family. "Where's the recording?" Williams typed back, "Equipment malfunction. Lost everything." "That's $1 million malfunction. Sometimes things break. So do people." Williams deleted the message thread and turned off his phone. He'd been dirty for so long he'd forgotten what clean felt like. Maybe it was time to remember. At 2 a.m. the prison settled into its restless quiet. But sleep didn't come easy to men carrying the weight of choices. Martinez finally got up and walked to his window. The soap crown caught moonlight like a tiny beacon, beautiful and broken and somehow still whole. He picked up the mirror shard and held it next to the crown. Reflection and reality, destruction and creation, the tools of 2 different kinds of men. For the first time in 15 years, Martinez made a decision based on hope instead of fear. He threw the mirror shard out the window. The sound of breaking glass echoed through the yard. A small noise that meant everything. Morning would bring consequences. The Brotherhood would demand loyalty. Other inmates would test boundaries. Guards would ask questions. The careful balance that kept men alive would shift. But tonight, in the space between heartbeats, change was possible. Tyson heard the sound of breaking glass and smiled. He knew exactly what it meant. Across the prison, other men lay awake in their cells, thinking about choices, about the difference between who they were and who they could become, about whether redemption was possible for men like them. Some would choose differently, some wouldn't. But for the first time in years, the choice existed. Dawn was coming, and with it the real test of what had happened in the shower room. Whether mercy was stronger than violence, whether hope could survive in a place built on despair, whether 2 men choosing differently could change an entire system. The answer would come when the sun rose and real life resumed. But tonight, in the darkness between yesterday and tomorrow, anything was possible. Even redemption. even for monsters who chose to be men. Morning arrived with the usual alarm, but nothing felt usual. Inmates moved through their routines with unusual tension. Conversations were quieter. Glances were more frequent. Everyone knew something had changed, but nobody knew what. Tyson walked into the dining hall and felt every eye in the room follow him to his table. The normal chaos of breakfast was replaced by an electric silence. Martinez entered 3 minutes later with his brotherhood. Snake, Big Jim, Carlos, and Danny flanked him as always. But the formation felt different, looser, uncertain. The two groups sat at their usual tables, 20 feet apart. The space between them felt like a canyon. Big Jim broke first. "So what's the play, Martinez? We gonna pretend yesterday didn't happen?" Martinez set down his coffee cup carefully. His hands were steady, but his voice carried new weight. "Yesterday happened exactly like it was supposed to happen." "Which was how?" "Because from where I sat, you let Tyson punk you out." The dining hall went dead quiet. Challenging Martinez's authority was a death sentence. Everyone knew it. Martinez stood slowly. Tyson watched from his table, his body coiled but his face calm. His hands remembered the weight of boxing gloves, the feeling of leather wrapping around his fists, the muscle memory of 1,000 fights. But those gloves were 20 years in the past. "Big Jim, you got something you want to say to me?" Big Jim stood too. 6'6" of scar tissue and rage. A man who'd killed 3 people in a bar fight and never shown remorse. "Yeah, I do. I think you went soft. I think Tyson got in your head with his philosophy bullshit. I think you forgot who you are." The words hung in the air like smoke. Other inmates started backing away from the potential blast radius. "And what am I, Big Jim? A killer, a leader. The man who built this brotherhood with blood and fear." Martinez nodded slowly. Then he did something no one expected. He sat back down. "You're right. That's exactly who I was." Big Jim looked confused. He'd been prepared for violence, not for agreement. "Was? Past tense, Jim. Was." Snake stepped forward. He could see where this was heading and didn't like the destination. "Martinez, what are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm tired of being who I was. I want to try being who I could be." Big Jim's face went red with rage. "You're kidding me. 24 hours with a washed-up boxer, and you're ready to throw away everything we built?" "Everything we built was based on fear, and I don't want to be afraid anymore." Tyson watched the confrontation with growing concern. This wasn't how change was supposed to work. It was supposed to be gradual, quiet, safe. But nothing about prison was safe. Big Jim pulled a shiv from his sleeve, crude metal sharpened to a killing point. He'd been carrying it for 3 years, waiting for the right moment to use it. "Then you're not my leader anymore." The dining hall erupted in chaos. Inmates scattered. Guards reached for their radios, but everything moved in slow motion compared to the violence about to explode. Big Jim lunged forward, the shiv aimed at Martinez's chest. Tyson's body moved before his mind could stop it. 20 years of muscle memory took over, the same reflexes that made him the most feared boxer in history. He crossed the 20 feet between tables in 3 steps, intercepted Big Jim's thrust with a perfect parry, grabbed the bigger man's wrist and twisted until the shiv clattered to the floor. Then he did something that shocked everyone in the room. He let Big Jim go. "That's enough." His voice cut through the chaos like a blade. Guards were running toward them, but Tyson raised both hands. "Nobody needs to die today." Big Jim stared at him in confusion. He'd been ready for a fight. Ready for blood, not ready for mercy. "Tyson, this ain't your business." "Yes, it is. Because what happens here affects everyone. You kill Martinez, the Brotherhood falls apart, prison war starts, guards crack down, everyone suffers." Tyson looked around the dining hall at 200 faces watching the confrontation. "Or we choose different. We prove that change is possible, that men can be more than their worst moments." Snake stepped between Big Jim and Martinez. "Maybe Tyson's right. Maybe there's another way." "What way? Singing Kumbaya and sharing feelings?" "No," Martinez said, standing slowly. "The way of building instead of breaking, of strength instead of violence, of hope instead of fear." Big Jim laughed, but it sounded hollow. "You really think you can change? Think you can wash the blood off your hands with good intentions?" "I don't know," Martinez said, "but I'm tired of not trying." Guards surrounded the table now, weapons drawn. Sergeant Williams was among them. his face pale with the realization that his carefully laid plans had completely unraveled. "Everyone on the ground! Now!" But nobody moved. Inmates and guards stared at each other across a moment of perfect tension. Tyson made the choice for everyone. "Officers, there's no problem here. Just a misunderstanding between friends." He picked up the shiv and handed it to Sergeant Williams. "Mr. Santos was showing us how dangerous these things can be. Educational purposes." Williams looked at the weapon, then at the faces around him. He had two choices: escalate the situation and destroy any chance of change, or let it slide and see what happened next. For the first time in his career, Williams chose hope over protocol. Educational purposes. Got it. Everyone back to breakfast. The guards withdrew. Inmates returned to their tables. But everything had changed. Big Jim looked around the room, seeing a new reality he didn't understand. Martinez extended his hand. "Still my brother, just walking a different path." Big Jim stared at the offered hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached out and took it. Change was possible, even for monsters, even in hell. The new schedule was posted on every bulletin board in the prison. Simple changes: shower times extended, library hours increased, group counseling sessions added to the weekly routine. Small adjustments that created space for something different. Warden Thompson sat in his office, reviewing incident reports. Violence was down 30%. Drug trafficking had decreased. Guard complaints were at a 5-year low. The most dangerous prison in New York was becoming something else. Something unexpected. Something hopeful. Martinez walked into the library carrying a box of books. Philosophy texts, history, poetry, donations from his daughter's school. She'd started writing him after he sent his first letter in 15 years. "Where do you want these, Mrs. Patterson?" The elderly librarian smiled and pointed to the new section they'd created. Personal development. Books about change, about second chances, about the possibility of redemption. "Right there, Miguel. Thank you." It still felt strange, being called by his first name instead of his last, but strange in a good way. Tyson was teaching a literacy class in the corner. 8 inmates learning to read, learning that education was another kind of power. The kind that opened doors instead of breaking them down. Remember, the goal isn't perfection, it's progress. David, the 19-year-old kid who'd asked about change, raised his hand. "Mr. Tyson, what if you make mistakes? What if you try to be better but mess up? Then you try again tomorrow. That's what hope means. Not that you won't fall, but that you'll get back up." Rodriguez, the young boxer, had been released 3 months ago. His last letter was pinned to Tyson's cell wall next to his daughter's photo. "Mr. Tyson, I got the job at the community center, teaching kids to box, but really teaching them discipline, respect, how to channel anger into something positive. You changed my life by showing me that strength and violence aren't the same thing." Snake and Carlos had started a garden behind the kitchen, growing vegetables for the dining hall, creating life instead of destroying it. Big Jim had transferred to a different prison. His choice said he needed distance to figure out who he was without the brotherhood. His last words to Martinez were, "Maybe you're right about change. Maybe it's never too late." Danny Ice Williams remained unchanged. Some men chose differently, some didn't, but the majority chose hope. Sergeant Williams had resigned from the prison system, took a job teaching at a police academy. His final report recommended that Dannemora become a model for rehabilitation instead of punishment. The recommendation was being reviewed at the state level. That evening, Tyson sat at his desk writing another letter to his daughter. She was in her 2nd year at Columbia now, pre-law, planning to work in prison reform. "Dad," her last letter had said, "I'm proud of the man you've become. Not the fighter you were, but the teacher you are. You proved that it's never too late to choose differently." He sealed the letter and looked out his window, past the razor wire, past the concrete walls, past the barriers that separated him from the world. Freedom wasn't about being outside these walls. Freedom was about choosing who you became within them. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new choices, new opportunities to build instead of break. But tonight, Mike Tyson went to sleep knowing that change was possible, even for monsters, even in hell, even for men who dared to hope. The steam had cleared, the truth remained.